Welcome to part 4 in this series of videos looking at the repair of an Allen & Heath Z24 audio mixing desk. In this episode we're going to repair the fault that causes some of the channels still to be heard while they're on mute, and we'll reassemble the desk and give it a test. Here you can see I'm just cleaning off all that flux residue from the back of the power supply board with some isopropyl alcohol and a toothbrush. So while I still have the stereo card out of the desk, I'm going to clean out the mechanical push switches on it using some Servicol Super 10 switch cleaning lubricant. I've already blown these switches out with an air duster to remove any dust or other contaminants that are in there. I think the cause of the mute problems on this desk are purely that there is dust or debris in the mechanical switches. I'll clean out all the mechanical switches in the entire desk, first with an air duster and then with this Servicol Super 10 spray, and I'll work the switches backwards and forwards a few times. So I'll now go around all the boards that are still in the desk that haven't been removed, and I'm using a can of air duster here just to blow out every switch, to blow out any dust or debris that's in there before I go around and then service them all with the switch cleaning spray. Using the air duster can, you have to be careful not to hold the can at too shallow an angle or you'll get freezing cold liquefied gas coming out of the can. Now that can be useful in some circumstances, but you don't want to spray gas or liquid air at minus 30 degrees centigrade over your capacitors. So from time to time I'm just gently guiding the straw with my other hand to make sure that I don't spray this liquefied gas over anything. I'm now carefully following up from the air duster can with the switch cleaning lubricant, and I'm guiding the lubricant into the little gaps around the switches. And once we turn the board over, we'll work all the switches up and down a few times just to get that cleaner right through to clean the contacts in the switches. So the air will have displaced any of the dust or other debris that's in the switches causing them to malfunction, and the switch cleaning lubricant will clean up the contacts and keep the switch properly lubricated. Now that we've serviced all the switches, it's time to reassemble the mixing desk for the final time. I'll start by putting the stereo channel back in place, and then we'll reconnect the main bus ribbon cable that runs from between all the cards. We'll follow that with the power supply and then the main bus distribution board. So when I'm putting this ribbon cable back on, I'm being very careful not to displace or bend any of the small pins that it plugs onto. I'll then make sure that it's correctly and firmly seated down onto every card. So with the main bus ribbon cable reinstalled, it's time to put the power supply back in. It sneaks in under these 4 ground cables, and then it screws in with the machine screws from the back panel again. Remembering that some of them go into captive nuts like these two on this heatsink here, and some of them use very small self-locking nuts. They'll be difficult to put in, so probably use a pair of snipe nose pliers or tweezers or something just to hold them in place. And here you can see me fishing one of them out with a magnetic screwdriver that I've already dropped inside the machine. So with the power supply loosely held in place just now with a couple of screws, I'm just going to take some time to orient and attach the main distribution bus card. It's important to get this the right way around, but it'll only fit one way. And again, it pushes onto a number of dual inline connectors. Be very careful not to bend or displace any of the pins. So before I finish tightening all the screws on the power supply, what I'm going to do is just turn the unit over and reattach all the ring nuts and screws for the stereo channel that we've installed. But what I'm doing here is just cleaning off some of the service lubricant that we used in the switches that has come through to the front panel. Now this is a silicone based lubricant, so I'm not bothered at all that it's come through the front panel, because I'm going to clean the whole of the front panel, in fact the whole of the machine, with a kind of silicone based cleaner anyway, which will just remove any grime and so on, and fingerprints and old ink marks and stuff from the front of the unit, but it'll also give it a nice kind of dashboard shine. What I'm doing here is just mechanically operating all of the switches that we've cleaned. And now I'm securing the stereo channel by first of all putting the T10 torx screw into the faunal connector, and then I'll put the screws in the fader, reapply all the ring nuts and tighten them up, and that will be the stereo channel resecured into the machine. You can see I still have this mono channel to reinstall, so we will carefully flip the unit back over and reinstall the mono channel now. The important part of any job like this is a nice hot cup of tea, which I've just been given, but I really shouldn't have it this close to the equipment that I'm working on, so it'll have to go. Just like that. So let's reinstall this mono channel card now, but before we do, let's not forget to service the switches on this board as well. So here we go with the switch cleaning lubricant. I've already blown them out with the air duster. And now we can operate the switches a few times just to work that cleaner in there, and set about reinstalling the mono channel card. We just sit it into place and carefully reattach the ribbon cable to it again. And then it's the same operation as before. Reinstall the screws and all the ring nuts and put all the caps back on, and that resecures the mono channel board into the unit. What I've discovered here while I'm reassembling this is that one of the EQ knobs has suffered some damage at some point in the life of this desk. It's maybe been knocked from the side or whatever, it's just got a kind of wedge chipped out of it. It's not worth replacing the whole knob, so what I'll do is I'll just hide it in the middle of the desk somewhere and put a nice undamaged one on channel 1, which is more visible. Now that the mono channel card has been reinstalled, We'll go back to finish installing this power supply. We'll put all the remaining screws back in and tighten them all, including the ones that are held with little captive nuts, and we won't forget to reattach the earth lead to the IEC connector where the power lead plugs in. So throughout this project, whenever I've removed a screw or a nut from this device, I've put it in this little magnetic tray, and I currently have, I think, about 14 screws left, which is exactly the right amount to hold on the back panel. So nothing lost and nothing forgotten to be refitted so far. That's always a good sign. So before I can put the back panel back on, there's just one or two jobs left to do. First of all, I'll re-secure this power supply cable with a cable tie. Pull it nice and tight, and we'll trim off any excess with just a pair of snips. And then we'll make sure that the main bus ribbon cable is firmly attached to every card. And I'll also re-secure the main bus distribution card using a couple of cable ties. So really the only job left on this machine before we can test it is to reinstall the bottom plate. And I'll do this, I think, by putting one screw in each side to make sure that I get it nice and square, and then go around and fill in the rest of the screws. I'll probably need to use a pointer or something just to line up the holes, because this back plate actually provides a lot of the structural rigidity of the mixer. Without the plate on, it actually twists and turns quite a bit. Looking into my magnetic tray, I have one screw left and one screw hole left. So nothing gained, nothing lost on this project, which was nice. Now that the back plate is installed, we'll give it a quick clean with just some silicone dashboard spray. This stuff doesn't leave any residue that you can feel with your fingers like some sprays does. And we'll do the front of the unit as well. But it does help to remove scuff marks, old pencil and pen marks, fingerprints and that kind of thing. It makes the appearance of the desk just look that wee bit better. What I'm doing now is just using some component cleaner just to remove some grubby marks from some of the sliders. Can't really see it in this picture, but there's just some grubby fingerprint marks and things left over on the sliders, so I'm going to go around and clean all them off as well. One final issue with this desk is that some of the fader knobs are missing. Well, just one's missing actually on one of the stereo channels. And I think the reason that it's missing is that some of the knobs are just really loose. They just pull straight off without any force at all, whereas the rest are quite well secured. So I don't have a spare knob to put on that at the moment, but I will replace the missing knob at some point in the future. What I'll do just now though is re-secure any of the knobs which are loose. And I think the way I'll do that is that I'll just put a piece of tape, and here I'm just using some electronic captan tape, and I'll put it over the T-bar and then slide the knob back on, and that should be enough just to firmly secure the knob onto the T-bar without gluing it on or making it permanently fixed. And after I tried this, it worked really well. So that's the solution we'll go with on this desk, until I can get some replacement knobs for these stereo channels. So the one thing left to do with this desk now is to test it, and to do that I'm going to use my Picoscope 2000, which is a USB laptop scope which has 2 input channels and an arbitrary waveform generator. I'll use the arbitrary waveform generator to generate a 2 kHz sine wave, and I'll inject that into each of the channels one at a time, and I'll use one of the input channels on the scope and I'll just plug it into the mono out on the desk, and then we'll bring all the channels up one by one and fade them in and out, and just make sure that that signal is not present on the output when it's muted, and that it is present and correct on the output when the channel is brought up. So here I'm just setting up the software to generate a 2 kHz sine wave at 1.5 volts peak to peak, and setting up the input channels. Now here I've set the input channel to plus and minus 2 volts, but I found that that was actually too low, and I changed that to plus and minus 5 volts by the time I actually ran the tests. Now I could have done this test with just a set of headphones, and I will do an audio test on this desk in the future, but I thought it would be better if we could actually visualise the signal coming from the desk. So I'm using the mono output channel of the desk and connecting it to channel A of the Picoscope, and we're plugging the signal generator into each of the channels in turn. So before we can start the test, we'll just set the desk up. We'll set all the input channels to 0 dB on the input gain. We'll flatten the EQ on every channel, turn down all the auxiliary sends, and pan every channel to the centre position. Then we'll set every input fader to minus infinity, and we'll set the output faders to 0 dB. We'll then make sure that every input channel is currently muted and that none are on PFL. Now the desk's set up as we want it, it's time to begin the tests. We'll inject the signal into the first channel, unmute the channel, bring the fader up to 0 dB, and then turn the gain up till just before the clipping light starts to light up. This will give us our maximum clean signal per channel. Then we'll operate the mute switch and make sure that the signal disappears from the output, as it should do. We'll repeat this with every channel. So the purpose of this test is twofold. First, it's to make sure that each channel can fade up cleanly, as we can see on the oscilloscope screen, and also that when we press mute, that the signal completely disappears from the output. The problem with this desk was that some channels could still be heard while the mute button was active. Using this test, we can see on the screen clearly whether any of the signal is leaking through to the master output while the mute button is switched on. As well as seeing the signal on the oscilloscope screen when we unmute the channel, you can also see it on the level meters, the coloured LEDs just below the outputs. I'm pleased to report that every channel worked perfectly in this respect. Especially the stereo channels, which were the source of the problem in the first place when I first tested this machine. That's the end of this series of videos looking at this Allen & Heath Z24 mixer. If you liked it, hit like and subscribe, and any questions or comments leave them in the comments section on YouTube. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.